We'd love to tell you what this podcast is about, but the truth is, we don't know. The CW Pod, at home on Iowa Everywhere. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Channel Seed, seedsmanship at work.
What's up, guys? Welcome to a new CW Pod here on Iowa Everywhere, changing things up yet again this week. You know it by now. If you've listened, we do different things on this podcast. We will do sports. We are not doing sports this week. Get into it. I want to thank our sponsor, Circa Sports Iowa. I actually just booked my flight going out there for week 0 of the college football season. I'm going to sign up for all the NFL contests, all that good stuff. It would be an awesome time if you are an Iowa Everywhere listener, viewer, wherever, if you want to join us out there. We'll be out there for week 0. Looking forward to that. My guest today is an old friend. And I don't, like, it's still weird, like, because he's Brett McIntyre, meteorologist from Channel 13. Soon to be former meteorologist from Channel 13. And Brett, I was thinking about this last night laying in bed, knowing that we were going to do this today. I can't believe how old we are. Because you've been at 13 for how many years now?
It's almost 15 years. It's like I'll come up like a month and a half short of 15 years. So a decade and a half.
Because I just feel like we were in college yesterday. For the listeners, Brett and I went to college together with Bloom, a bunch of other friends, obviously, but us three are the ones that are kind of still hanging around here. And you were a sports guy. Because I was, and then so you were a year younger than me. I was trying to walk myself through this. You're a year younger than me. I go off, start doing my thing. And then you all of a sudden, I talk to you and you're like, yeah, I'm going to be a meteorologist. And I was like, whoa. Like, I knew you were a smart guy. I didn't even know you had like an interest in that. What made you pick meteorology over sports?
Well, the plan kind of always was meteorology. So we kind of crossed the streams because my dad was a sports writer for the paper in Fort Dodge. So I'd always kind of grown up around sports. I've been to all, you name it, small high school, anywhere north of Highway 30. I've probably seen a basketball or football game in any of those spots. And then we've been to all kinds. It was the cool thing growing up is we got to go to see Iowa football and basketball games, Iowa State football and basketball games. So I've been in the press box at Jack Trice when it wasn't even a press box, when it was over under the stands on the east side where those club seats are now. So I've been in there. I've been, hanging around after games, waiting for my dad to get out of interviews. So getting autographs from all kinds of 90s Iowa State basketball and football players, Iowa basketball and football players. I mean, I remember one time waiting in Carver Hawkeye after a game, waiting for everything to come out. My dad hadn't come out and finished the story. And we're just sitting there in the bowl. It's like me and my brothers, my mom, and like a security guard. And Jacob Jakes comes back out to get in more shots after the game. And so we're standing there like rebounding for him. So I have all kinds of weird stories like that.
Did he elbow you?
Ames and Iowa City. Oh yeah. Then when my dad came back, then he let us take a couple shots. So we're jacking up threes as like 10-year-olds out there. So
did Jacob Jakes try and like trip you or kick you in the junk? Like
no, we did not catch any elbows, but we were too low. I think they all just would have gone over our heads anyway. But so I always had the sports background. I knew I wanted to do meteorology, but so I kind of finagled my way into writing for the Daily. Make some of that beer money on the side or whatever. I know one of our friends was writing at the Daily at the time too, so I had all kinds of connections there. So that was a lot of fun on the side. But yeah, I've been doing the meteorology degree and ended up kind of doing the double degree thing, just the way the credits worked out. So I had journalism and broadcasting there to go hand in hand. So parlayed that into the internship with Keith. So a bunch of our path is about the same because we were both interns for Keith. We were both Cyclone insiders on WHO 13, which in my deep dive through the vaults, I have the infamous clip that almost got me banned from Ames forever. I'm not going to name any names, but I know there are still people involved with the athletic department, or might not be anymore, but to this day are still upset about something that may or may not have happened on the television news.
Can I say it?
In the middle, sure. I gotta put the clip out now that I found it. But
I think you have to. Yeah. So they used to do this deal. Do they still do the Cyclone Insider thing? Is that still even a thing?
God, no, those are long gone.
Okay.
I think we got paid like $25 a pop for it. If I
didn't even get that. I always got gift cards to Ohana Steakhouse.
But yeah, it might have been a gift card. Whatever it was worth like $25.
I never got paid. I ate so much Ohana Steakhouse during that era of my life.
Oh my gosh.
But okay, so I did it. So there was this deal where on like Thursday nights, we would go on the news and we would give like a minute monologue and make a prediction for the Iowa State game that coming week. I got run off because I didn't look the part enough. Like I was in college and my clothes weren't ironed to like I wasn't a TV guy. I'm an internet guy, right? I never wanted to be a TV guy. And Murph gives me shit about that to this day. It's a on-running joke. See, I move on. I'd done that for a couple of years. You get the gig. And this was during the Chiswick years, right? And you wore a paper bag over your head for the broadcast.
Yeah. So I got into the same bit where it was kind of, this was 2007. So it's Chiswick's first year. Iowa State is horrendous. Now, the people that got mad about this can pretend they're mad, but they don't like Gene Chiswick. They know that era stunk. It was terrible. So don't get me this offended. But it's going terribly for Iowa State. This is the year that Iowa loses on senior day to Western Michigan to miss a bowl. Plus they had just a plethora of just horrible off the field. So just the whole thing is just going terribly. And Keith comes to me and he says, the news director, the management's kind of getting, we not want to do these anymore because the Iowa State guys just coming on and, kind of trying to nicely say, well, they're going to get their butt kicked again this week or whatever. And Iowa's a mess. Maybe we just not waste, 2 minutes each week on these things. So you gotta figure out a way to like spice it up a little bit. Well, Chiswick hands me a gift. I can't remember if it was homecoming or not, but they played Texas and they get beat 56-3.
Vince Young played in that game.
I mean, that's bad. I mean, that's like
that
early
was
90s.
Yeah, that was Colt McCoy.
Yeah. But it was like an early 90s Iowa State butt kicking. So we're trying to think something. Yeah, and so it goes into that. I get a paper bag, a cardinal and gold paper bag that goes on the head at the end of the sign off, and it saved the segment. You tell a senior in college that wants to get into TV that you might get canceled. I can't lose that $25 a week. No. I gotta find that extra gear. So we found it.
Yeah,
but
this is also an era where local TV is still like primo for sports.
Right. And to the close thing, when I post the clip, it may or may not have been a red T-shirt underneath a sport jacket. I can't rule that out.
Well, I almost got run off that gig because I didn't iron well enough.
Oh man,
it was a really stressful deal. Every Thursday, I'd have to get up and we were out raising hell until about 2:00 the night before, and then I had to go in there and do that.
It was an era for sure. So then years and years later, this was like maybe 5 years ago. One of our mutual buddies that would come back and help out media with football games was up in the press box, and the person that was most irritated by this, we'll leave him nameless, but you might get it from the impression. He goes, "So, Grant, are you still friends with that Brett McIntyre?" He goes, "Yeah." He just shakes his head and walks off. So
have a reputation.
I never lost the invite to Si's House of Trivia. So the reach didn't go that far, but yeah, I was on thin ice there for a while. For a while in the Jacobson building. Yeah.
It's just,
now Keith says I should show that to Campbell because Campbell will like that now because it's another show how far we've come.
Campbell
and I think that's right.
Great.
That shows us the growth. where we were.
Campbell, I don't think he would ever say this to me now, but it was early. I think it was the first year that he was there, and he actually heard something on my radio show and texted me that I wasn't being hard enough on the team.
Oh my gosh.
Like, he was just like, oh, we suck. You're going to totally different deal than back in the day where, people are very sensitive when they work in these athletic departments. Yep. I understand it. All right, so I want to talk to you about your weather career because you're not really quitting it. You're just kind of moving on. You're getting out of television full time. So you've been doing this for 15 years. I want to talk about the start. So didn't you? And again, were you an intern in 2008 when the Parkersburg Tornado hit, or were you actually full time? Because I remember I'm down at KMA doing my thing. Mm-hmm. We still kept in touch, and I just remember you were on the scene, and I was like super proud of you, and like watching all this stuff, and like talk me through that. I feel like that was your start.
Yeah, that was kind of my first weather appearance. I was sort of, I lost the details exactly. I was hired for 13 or had the job, but I hadn't started yet. So that was at the end of May. I graduated in early May, and I was going to be starting in the middle of July at 13. So I had kind of that, 2 months of just, I can do whatever I want because I've got a job lined up, but school's done. So we went storm chasing that day. It was with me and my brother Brad, and we chased the storms. Like when they went up, you could tell everything was set up. You're like, oh man, if there's storms here, we're gonna get some tornadoes, maybe a big one. So the storms kind of started up just right by Fort Dodge, a little bit past. We go out to chase, and we're kind of going from behind, and we catch up to it like right as we're getting to Parkersburg, like right at Applington, and that's where the firefighters are out on the highway. And they're like, no, don't go anymore. There's a tornado that just touched down on the ground up here. And at that point, they didn't know that, it had gone through Parkersburg. It was still in between Applington and Parkersburg. And I said, oh, no, it's okay. I'm a meteorologist. I pulled that card, apparently. And they're like, and I'm still probably in my, wrinkled T-shirt wear that I wore on the Iowa State campus all the time with my brother. And I don't know, somehow it passed the smell test. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead, go on. So we drive on. And right before we get to Parkersburg, I look at the rearview mirror, and it's just flashing lights everywhere. Like every sheriff's deputy is coming out, driving along, and it's kind of the first. It's what I kind of tell when I do talks all the time with people. Like when you go out storm chasing, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to see a tornado out in the middle of a cornfield or something. You don't think you're going to come across a town that's just been like leveled. And so even at that point, I'm still thinking, oh, it may, maybe it hit a farmhouse or something or whatever. And we roll into Parkersburg. And we actually went the other way because there were some emergency vehicles coming through. I didn't want to get in their way. So we didn't go the main way on the highway that would have taken us right into all the devastation. So we go through the other side of town, and everybody's like out in their yards looking around at the sky. And so I'm kind of looking, you see more funnels, and you can look back to the south, and the sun's already back out. So the sun's kind of in your eyes. I couldn't see. I said to my brother, do those trees look weird? So we turned and we went that way. And as soon as we came over the hill, it was just like a line. You just went from normal everything to just gone. Like wow. There's like a row of houses where you could have literally like sat in your living room and watched the whole thing come on by. So we stopped there, and so I hadn't started officially yet, but it was a Sunday. I'm trying to call the newsroom. All I have in my phone for like the newsroom is just the main like tip line that anybody and all the crazies can call in on. And it's 5:00, so the news is going, I'm calling, can't get anybody to pick up. I'm calling Ed, who was actually out of town that day. Can't get him to pick up. Finally, I get a hold of Keith on his cell phone because I still had that from my internship. And I said, Keith, it's Brett. I'm in Parkersburg. There's been this terrible. I'm like, you got to send everything. We still have the chopper. I said, send the chopper, send the satellite truck. Tell the newsroom to send everything. And as soon as the news was over, Lynn Melling called me on the cell phone and tried to get me, and it was just like I can't describe it. And there's like nothing here. Just get everyone here. Wow. And so at 10:00, I did this sweaty, long-haired interview. I've tweeted out or put out a few clips of it on my Facebook. So that'll be around here the next couple of days too. Wow. But yeah, that was the first real appearance weather-wise.
So were you there like rolling up on this before even like the sheriff and stuff did?
It was about the same time. I mean, it was
Okay.
within probably like 5 minutes. We were right on the backside. So, when we talk about like the hook echo on the radar, there would have been this really thin curtain of rain. So we couldn't actually see the tornado from where we were. We would have needed like another 5 or 6 miles to try to catch up and get on the other side of it, which is another stupid thing you should never do. When you're chasing from behind, it's a good way to drive right up into it on the backside of it. But yeah, we couldn't actually see the tornado, but we were there probably 5 minutes afterwards. I mean, there's some really crazy things that the one that sticks out in my mind is the videotape, like VHS tape. That stuff was everywhere, like sucked out of the tapes. It was just strung around everywhere. It was weird.
It feels like real quick. I want to thank our friends from Channel Seed. We're in the Channel Seed studios. You can watch this on YouTube. Listen wherever you get your podcast. Brett McIntyre joins me. Feels like the storm chasing deal, like everything, he's kind of taken off, right, with social media. Everybody's got a camera now, a cell phone camera, which I assume you didn't really. In 2008, you probably had a cell phone, but not,
No.
There's no great camera on it. Like smartphones were really, I don't think the iPhone existed then. Yeah. Like, how do you, I want to talk about chasing because I did spotting when I was same time when you were in 2008. I was working local radio in Western Iowa where I had become a trained spotter because it's a really big deal back there. Nobody in Western Iowa we get Des Moines news and we get Omaha news, but nobody really gives a crap about us. So when there's severe weather, everybody's locked into this station that I worked at. And I kind of had my perch where whenever there were warnings and stuff, I'd go out and sit at. But I was never, I never chased because I've seen a handful of tornadoes now, but I never chased them because there's an art to that. How do you view all these guys and gals on like Twitter and stuff who, there's a lot of really good ones, but I would imagine like there's a lot of guys and gals who don't really know what they're doing, and it just seems like crazy dangerous to me. What's the fine line?
Yeah. It's. I mean, in some cases, the danger right now in storm chasing is almost more from other chasers than it is from the tornadoes themselves. There's a bunch of pictures just from this past weekend. We had all the tornadoes in Nebraska on Friday. Chasers from all over the country. Then they all came to Iowa, and there's some pictures out there on Twitter of just the highways just lined with cars. You get into this gridlock, and so that gets to be a little bit dangerous. I would say anybody that's going to chase needs to do what you did, do the spotter training. The National Weather Service does it every year. They try to get one in every county here around Central Iowa. It's free. If you're going to do that, you need to do that just so you know what's going on, because it is dangerous and it's easy. You get locked in on what you're watching, and if you don't know what you're doing or you're not, and even if you do, sometimes you can get caught up in what's in front of you and not realize that it's back building behind you, and there's another storm that's going to come maybe behind you, cut off your exit route. I mean, there's a lot of different hazards there. So I'd say anybody that does it needs to be on go through that spotter training for sure. And then again, just there's a lot, everyone wants to get close. There's money in, trying to sell and license some of these videos, and, everybody's got their hustle. You're going to do what you got to do. But the ones that really get the people that are very obviously like recklessly driving, like going 80, 90, 100 miles per hour in the like Winterset tornado, there's one guy that's running stop signs. That's not going to help anybody. And, we had people that live stream on a weather channel a few years ago that blew through a stop sign, T-bone somebody, and got themselves killed. So don't do that. Don't put the emergency lights on your car. That's illegal anyway. I know you're chasing, you're trying to, at some point do a service if you're, reporting to the weather service or whatever, but guys, you still gotta respect the rules of the road. I mean, you're not law enforcement. Don't put flashing lights on your car. Just try to just be respectful of everyone. And, I think then we can all have our hobby, but we don't we don't want to see more of these incidents of chasers crashing into each other. And even, Tim Samaras is a big storm chaser and researcher, published a ton of papers. And they were like the real life Twister, going out and putting probes and things in the path of the storms. And back in the mid 20 teens, got killed in Texas by this massive tornado that turned, a direction that they weren't expecting right at the last second. And he and his son, another person got killed there. So it can happen even to people who know exactly what they're doing and are out there actually gathering research and publishing papers on this, not just out, to get a bunch of likes or shares or whatever. So there's a lot of danger to it. We don't want to be adding to it, but just by the way we're behaving, because it might go a little bit farther, go a little bit more viral that way.
Okay, so this guy, this professional researcher in Texas, right? Like, this is what always fascinates. Like, how do you know, right? Because like it's the unpredictability of the Twister that makes it so fascinating, right? Mm-hmm. It's the power. So when you say like, oh, well, you don't want to go up behind it, or like, is there there's no sure thing, right? Like, the storm's supposed to behave like a certain way, but how often does it do what you think it's going to do, I guess? What makes it's easy to watch LeBron James and go, he's one of the greatest of all time. What makes a great storm chaser? Is it instinct? Is it knowledge? What would you say it is?
Yeah, a lot of it. You got to have the knowledge to begin with, but there's definitely some instinct, and it's not kind of like Twister, where they just look at, oh, this is about to it's about to turn to the right. It's not necessarily like that, but there are different things, especially that might be a little bit tougher in the field. But if you got somebody in the back that's watching radar, you know kind of which way it's going to go normally. If it's going to, when they strengthen, sometimes they're going along, they might turn right. And then if you've got maybe a good grip on what's going on, and you can tell maybe something's happening here where you're getting maybe the downdraft coming around, something cutting it off, where it's going to weaken a little bit toward the end of these tornadoes sometimes. And this is where people can get in trouble when it kind of, it's called occludes, or when the cold air kind of starts to wrap around and you start the end of the life cycle of that tornado before a new one starts. Then it can make these kind of unusual left turns that deviate from what you would expect. And trying to know when that's going to happen ahead of time, you don't always know with that amount of time. So it's more about just making sure you're in a good space in relation to the storm, where one, you're not in the direct line, and you have a way out if something changes. So it's some of these people that kind of get up close to it and then get on the wrong side, where, yeah, you're fine for now, but if this thing starts to weaken, it's going to come right over you. And now you don't have an option, because you can't go forward because the tornado's there. You can't go backwards because that's where the baseball size hit. You get yourself boxed in if you get on the wrong side of it. So you gotta know where you're at and have that plan. Okay, what's my move if something changes here? How do I get out? And when you get a storm on three sides of you, you've only got one. If something changes, then you're in trouble.
Okay, so what about? Do you remember a few years ago? It was the one that I got. I think you guys may have used my footage, the Bondurant one, and then Marshalltown got leveled that day. So that is I have a newfound respect for these storms after experiencing that. I was getting ready to go to my radio show.
Right.
And my phone started blowing up. Well, first of all, it started with my dog was like spinning around in circles in our living room. And it was weird. I thought he had to go to the bathroom. Let him outside. He's outside barking. My phone blows up and it says we're in a tornado warning. And it was sunny out in Bondurant that day. And I'm not kidding. Within 5 minutes, I can see the funnel. I'm standing out on my deck, and like the freight train thing is real. I've learned, after being that close to one, it's a very real thing. I corral the dog. The one thing I learned about it when you see one that close is it's more of a suction than you see like on the videos, right? Like. I think when we see it on TV, it's like you think it's like this swirling, but when you see it that close, like I could literally see like particles from people's roof going up into the funnel. That day was really weird, though, because it was one of those days where we weren't in a tornado warning. We were not in a severe thunderstorm warning. Boom, tornado warning. And I was like you, so that this rolls by, and me and my neighbor, we were like the first people on the scene, like a block away. What happens on a day like that?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because that is one of my most memorable days because it was the weirdest. You're right. It was not like a typical tornado day. I was coming in the afternoon, but around lunch, we have this sometimes, especially kind of in the middle of the summer. Maybe it's not peak tornado season. The National Weather Service will put out this thing that says, conditions are favorable for funnel clouds today. And basically, they're glorified dust devils. There's not any spin up like where the storm is. So the storm itself isn't doing anything. It's just that we've got this weird spin close to the ground. And when it gets stretched out, like when you twist yourself up on the swing set, then you pull your feet in and you spin faster. It's making like these weak, like dust devil things. And so that was what was put out for like Ames up to Algona. We just kind of have these funnel clouds that they're harmless. Maybe they touch the ground. They're down for a couple minutes. They're gone. They're not going to level your house. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Tweeted that out. Went about my day. I'm driving into the station. I have KXNO on, and the emergency alert thing comes on, and it says tornado warning. I'm like at Grace Lake, and I'm like, oh, crap. And it's Polk County. And then I'm definitely like, oh, gosh. And so I'm just thinking, well, these things just touch the ground, because if that does happen and somebody sees it, they'll put out a small tornado warning for like 10 minutes. I know Amber's in at the station, so I'm like, all right, I'll be there in a minute. I get in and I sit down at the radar so she can go walk on camera. And on the side of our screen where I have the radar, I get this like real-time feed of like pictures that are sent into our photo or our Facebook pages. And I'm looking at those pictures. And when we have these weak funnel clouds, they're usually just really skinny and smooth. And I'm seeing all this stuff coming in from Bondurant. And I'm like, that looks like a real tornado. I mean, that looks more, that's not what I'm expecting to see and what had happened. And it's still in 15 years, this is the only time it's ever happened. We had this weak spin, but it caught up to this warm front that we had that was basically just east of Des Moines. And when it caught up to that, it got into more spin. And so we went from funnel clouds to the National Weather Service's like, these could be tornadoes and some strong. And we ended up with two EF3s that day in Marshalltown and Pella, plus all of the stuff in Bondurant. But Bondurant was like right where it changed, because I remember the pictures. People were sending in pictures, and there was like 2 or 3 in like one picture.
Yeah,
it looked like the day after tomorrow.
After that one flew over my house, and again, it didn't really touch the ground until after it was past me. I have a video where I could see 3 tornadoes at one time. There was one out in a field to the north of town. There was the one that destroyed the good chunk of town. And then there was another in the distance that I don't ever think touched down. But it was the craziest 10 minutes because it went from sunny to, and like say, I mean, I just have a newfound respect for it because I'd never know. You hear about these things, the freight train, the suction, until you see it up close like that. And like uprooting trees, like a block from my house was untouched. House was untouched. But then, literally a block away, trees that have been there for 100 years have been ripped out of the ground. And an entire block was down. And it was unlike anything. And again, like I went from a guy who was like, oh, like, hundreds of people listening to this right now who are like, tornadoes are really cool, we like following severe weather, to all of a sudden being like, I respect this a lot more, I think.
It's a weird feeling because it is cool. You do get excited seeing it. And but then when you've seen, I've seen what's happened in Parkersburg. I was down in Winterset for 2 days after that came through, and just all the stuff there. And so, it's weird because there still is, an excitement and wonder about it, but it is one of those things that until you do see what can actually happen, it's like that abstract thing. It's hard to connect. It's hard to explain to somebody, until it does happen to you or you do see it.
So during your time, we used to have fun with you on the radio show when I was at KXNO, but we had the derecho, we had the bomb cyclone.
Yep.
Trying to think of all these like weird. Derecho was the derecho the weirdest thing that you ever saw in your? I mean, as far as like, because that thing was freaking crazy. Like if you go back and look at the radar from that day, but we kind of had warning. Like we knew we were going to get a storm, but nobody.
Yeah.
Like my wife got stuck in. She was at the mall, the outlet mall. And
Yeah.
when that thing happened, and she couldn't leave. But like, I don't. Was that the weirdest thing you saw?
Yeah, it's probably, and it's weird because now you have to specify because we had two derechos. We had one in December, then later. So the big one that happened in August that just like crushed Cedar Rapids, that was weird. Just because we knew it was coming, and I was coming in the afternoon. Again, the theme of my 15 years is every time everything hits the fan, somebody is gone, and usually it's Ed. Ed was gone for this one. When Urbandale flooded, that flash flood, I was gone. Megan was gone. I was in Chicago on a guys' weekend at a Cubs game. So, and I realized what was happening, and so I'm kind of like reading it out to my buddy, and then we realized we left one of our cars. My buddy's car was in Beaverdale at their house.
The night we lost Larry, right? Cotler?
Yes. Yeah. That was the night that Larry Cotler died in that flash flood. Yeah. So that was unusual. But yeah, the derecho, I remember trying to get my stuff done so I could get in early, running all the errands. My daughter was still not even a year old, almost a year old, or 2 years old, year and a half old, 2020 was. But I'm running, I'm getting the dog to the vet, getting all this stuff done. I'm like, all right, I'll be there by 2. And then it just keeps going faster and faster as it's picking up strength. And so eventually I'm leaving here at 11:30 and it's coming through like at the same time. I'm literally backing out of the driveway. My daughter is like screaming in the front door, and my wife's like laughing because the power just went out, and I'm sitting there pushing the garage door button like 8 times before I figured out that the power's out. Oh. And then I get like a block from the house, and that's when it comes through. And I kid you not, it wasn't like leaves coming off the tree or branches. There were like chunks of the trees just like detaching from their tops and flying just airborne like 30 feet in the air across the road. And I'm sitting there going, I have got to get off of this road. I'm like, I don't know where to go. And it was like just a hurricane. I called my boss. I said, Rod, I'm on my way. Somebody's got to hold the door open because I don't know if I have my wallet, and 2, I'm just going to make a run. If the door's not open, I'm going to run through it. So yeah, that was nuts. And then the one that we
like 3 days after.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have power for 3 days in Cedar Rapids. It was like 2 weeks for some people. They had like curfew and National Guard. That was nuts.
And that was in the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then to tie in the sports thing to it, all hell was breaking loose because they were like, that was when the Big Ten announced that they weren't going to have a season.
Yep.
And because I remember, like, I'm trying to do all this stuff with no internet and no power, and like it was impossible. It was not. We couldn't do anything. Yeah. We had generators running all over the place. That was so okay. To carry on from that, like, and you jump in here and tell me if I'm like completely off base, but it does seem like we've had more extremes. You hear, climate change and all that stuff and how it affects like the shorelines and stuff like that. Do you believe that our climate is more extreme than when you started like 15 years ago, or do you think it's about the same?
I think it is. I think it's hard. You can't really ever take one specific storm, like let's say the derecho, and say the derecho happened because of climate change. Like it's very hard to look at the whole totality of everything and pick out one specific thing and say this is because X, because there's 100 different things that go into it. But with the way that things are changing, basically you're loading the dice is the best. That's the example that everyone says is you're increasing the odds that things like this can happen. And and people hate some people will hate the term like the 100-year flood and 500-year flood and on and on and on. And really that's just supposed to be down to a percentage. 100-year flood is basically there's a 1 in 100 chance that you'd have it in any particular year. So it's basically a 1% chance of that. 500-year flood, that's like a 1 or a 0.2% or whatever it comes out to be.
Mm-hmm.
But those things are happening more. So we kind of have to adjust those percentages now. If we've got more heat, we've got more humidity, we've got all this stuff into the atmosphere, which, I mean, it's a fact. It's a documented fact that it's there. We can argue all day why that is or isn't, but it is warmer and there is starting to be more humidity. And so that's going to increase the chances that some of these things can happen, but it's also going to change other parts of the atmosphere. For the engineers out there at Iowa State, you guys, we share a lot of the same coursework. A lot of you guys probably could go through meteorology because there's a lot of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics, especially because the atmosphere is basically, it's a fluid, it's air, but it's basically like you're trying to predict what's going to happen in some random point of a swimming pool. If you drop a bowling ball in on one side, how is that going to ripple through? So changing one thing changes like 17 other things. If you play pool and you're trying to hit a combo shot from one end of the table, if you're off by just a little bit at one end, by the time you get to the other end, you're like miles off. So the more heat, more humidity, all the change in the climate, it's going to change some things in one way that might make the storms worse. It might at the same time increase the chance that we're going to have drought. If it's warmer and hotter, the hurricanes might be stronger because the air is warmer, but it also, there's some research maybe that says it might increase the winds up above the clouds, which kind of hurt hurricanes. So does that mean we'll have fewer hurricanes because they get torn apart? Will we have fewer hurricanes, but the ones that do happen are stronger? So there's 100 different things that go into it. And that's why it's so hard to tease out to just one specific thing. Say, okay, that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have climate change. It might have. It still might have, but it's maybe more likely that it did, or maybe more likely that it'll happen again sooner. Like we have a derecho in Iowa, like about every 2 years. It's kind of the somewhere in Iowa gets hit by a derecho. But the one we had in 2020, that was like the F5 of tornadoes. We have tornadoes all the time. We don't always have F5s. We have derechos every couple of years, but that was like the top end of the scale of derecho. So
do you, after doing weather in Iowa for as long, do you guys just like think that the guys in like Phoenix just suck? Like, is that just where all the hacks go? I just feel like your job's so much more difficult, right? Like you got all this stuff. We got snow, we got humidity. Now it's dry. Oh, we got tornadoes. We got derechos. We got the bomb cyclone. The guy in Phoenix, it's going to be 90.
I tried to talk Ed into retiring to San Diego for years and years and years. Empty that seat out. No, yeah, we make fun of it because it's gonna be 78 and sunny again today. Back to you guys. You need like 10 seconds for weather in San Diego. So, I could get myself in a lot of trouble. But if you look at some of the big markets, I mean, like the really big markets down there in California and Florida, Ed and I, we don't have the looks for that. I'll just leave it there.
That Al Roker markets. Guy. Do you like Al Roker? Is he like? I mean, he's just kind of a hack, isn't he? He's not really a real meteorologist.
Al is a very nice guy. Okay. He's got some interesting glasses. I don't know if I could pull off some of the colored glasses.
This guy couldn't hold your jockstrap when it comes to forecasting the weather.
Have you ever heard Lewis Black spit on the weather? An Al Roker? You got to look that up sometime. I
love Lewis Black though.
Oh, he's got some epic weather. We may have played that a few times in the weather office late at night.
Last thing, and then we're going to get on to what you're doing next. But so like you started 15 years ago. Internet is, boy, we're not really hitting full cylinders yet, but we're getting close, right? We don't have the speed that we do now, but the technology is getting better. So like, is it easier to be a meteorologist now, or was it easier 20 years ago? Because you have all these tools, but then you can't like completely rely on the tools. Like, walk me through that dynamic.
Yeah, I think, in a lot of cases, things have gotten better. I mean, radar is miles ahead of where it was when I started with the things that we can see in terms of trying to figure out debris and just like how small we can resolve now in the storm. So radar is way better. The computer models are better. There are more of them now than there were before to look at. So
Like Earl?
Sometimes it's good to have more than maybe 2 or 3 options, but then sometimes if you've got 10 and they're all saying something different, then that just makes it even worse. It's helped in some ways. Yeah, the social media stuff. I mean, it's added more things to your plate that you've got to do to try and keep up. So in that respect, and just kind of the way that the whole business has changed, there's more things to do. It's harder and kind of takes away some of your focus from some of the other stuff that you'd rather do. So I think it's gone both ways. I think the technology has definitely helped. I think our coverage is better for it than it was than when we started. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of where the future goes here with broadcast and internet and social media. I can remember when our station did not have Facebook and Twitter pages and was actively resisting creating them. If you can imagine that.
Take traffic away.
Yeah. Didn't want, yeah. And it's kind of gone full circle. We resisted on that, got behind on that, and then went all in on that. And now everything's kind of back. Oh, we want to drive them back to the website and try and get the revenue from there. So that rat race is still spinning its wheels.
Whatever I'm not speaking for Brett here. He's still got a few days left, but whatever the corporate czar in New York City wants. I've done the corporate media thing enough in my life. Because it's just interesting to me, and like I don't know anything about it, but all you weather guys like this, the promos are always, we got the new Doppler, the Doppler 6.94, and then the other station will be like, we have the most advanced weather technology in all of Des Moines, and it's interesting. Like we still see that stuff.
The great thing is the best stuff we all use. We all have it because the Weather Service has got the best of the best, and none of the stations are launching the satellites. I can tell you that much. We don't have any deals with Elon here to get things off the ground. So anything that's going up in space, that's all paid for by your tax dollars. So we're all sharing that.
Okay, so you're getting out of the TV grind, and that is a grind. You've worked brutal hours for a long time. I mean, I did my internship with Keith Murphy, and after a month, I told Keith I don't want to be on TV because I wouldn't have been able to do it. The hours, like, not necessarily the amount of that you work, but like the going in at 2.
The way,
it's just, it wasn't for me. I knew it from day one. I respect anybody who can.
Evenings, weekends, holidays. It's all.
It's
and like like I said, my dad worked for a local paper, so you're covering high school on Friday nights and Iowa State on Saturdays. And my mom was a nurse; the hospitals never closed, so that's. And it's not just media, so I can't complain. You make everyone feel sorry for me, but it does suck.
I'm happy for you as your friend because you're getting out of that, and I had to do that with KXNO, and that was a very different deal. But being locked into that afternoon drive made it very difficult with kids. You have a family. You're kind of going into more of a 9 to 5 thing, although it's not necessarily one. So tell everybody you're not leaving. You're still, I don't know, you're still in the genre of weather, right? That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, definitely still at the very least weather adjacent. So I'm going to Polk County Emergency Management here coming up next week. And I'm going to be under the emergency manager, kind of on their team, a team of 4. It's called kind of a program assistant is my title. So I'll be working with, all anything that's in Polk County, whether, it's the cities, municipalities, fire departments, police department, all of that to help plan just emergency response to whatever can go wrong, or drills, tabletop exercises, all of this stuff. So your floods, your tornadoes, your derechos, all of that, I'm going to have my hands in on that. If there's an apartment fire, train to, anything bad that happens that's going to need some sort of mobilized response, we're kind of helping the communication. Not necessarily like an authority, but we might go to these meetings, make sure if somebody's making a change, it's not going to mess up this plan over here. If Windsor Heights is going to do this and Clive is going to do that, and we want everything to mesh together. 80-35, the fair. I saw pictures, our emergency managers, AJ Mum, behind the scenes at the NCAA tournament. So the reach here will be wide. I'll still be involved in a ton of things around the metro. And again, a lot of times, some of that stuff that's going to get put into motion is going to be those weather events. So when I told my chief photographer that I was leaving, what I was doing, he's the one that always goes with me when we go to tornado damage or flood weather, and he said, well, that won't change anything. I'll just still show up at the next terrible thing that's happened and point the camera at you and have you talk about it. So I said, well, yeah, that's about that might be pretty close to how it shakes out. It depends. If AJ doesn't want to talk to the media, he can say, hey, you go do it. You know how to do it.
Well, that's good for you, and that's an important job. I guess like a guy like me, before you told me what you were doing, I didn't even know that those jobs existed. But then you think about it, and it's like, well, yeah, there's got to be somebody putting together these plans. And do you? I guess like I don't know. I'm not trying to hang on to the climate change thing, but it just seems different. Like the whole our whole climate seems different, and I'm not even saying it's for the worse. I'm not trying to get political here. But it feels like to me, as a guy who spends a lot of time outside, it feels like to me we're like a month behind. Is that accurate? Like, feels like summer goes deeper. Feels like it takes it longer to hit. Winter doesn't really start until like January, February. Like, is that accurate? Do you think?
Yeah, things have been kind of off here lately. I think last year, I can't remember what the stat was, but like our tornado warnings were coming later and later into the season. We weren't getting them as earlier. And some of that, we just had 3 years in a row of La Nina, which has only happened like once or twice. So those kind of things can change and flip-flop and last for a couple of years that will throw things off. So that's part of it. And the other thing, I mean, you can do, and you can talk to farmers, I think, especially if you talk to them in Western or Northwestern Iowa, that they're going to notice things like this. What's called the 100th meridian. It's basically the marker between the really dry Mountain West and high plains and the more humid eastern half of the country. We're on the eastern side of that, but that line is moving more and more to the east. So when you drive across Nebraska and South Dakota, they got the big irrigation systems out there for their fields. That drier climate is coming more to the west. And obviously we've had more drought here lately in Iowa, but especially you get up towards Sioux City and in that northwestern corner of the state, it's getting drier there. And I think you've had more people that have talked about, if we're going to have to start irrigation in Iowa or not. And the overnight low temperatures are getting warmer. My uncle was a farmer, he said, the perfect temperatures for growing corn, because corn, it does most of its growing at night. That's at least the simplified version that at least he's explained to me and I tell it, but 86 of the day and temperatures in the 60s overnight. So as those overnight lows go up, I mean, there's farmers that can notice that thing and then start to see how that impacts the yields and starts to knock it down a little bit. So there's different ways to tell, that something is different here. Something is changing, and we don't want it to change too far. We have to have, like we said, get those big irrigation systems out there, and that presents a whole nother slew of problems.
Well, you'll still be my guy, okay? Still going to go to you.
For sure.
I'm glad I'm not doing talk radio anymore, because anything weather related, I'd be like, we're going to get McIntyre on the phone here. No, I've loved watching your career. My wife is very, of all people, the most disappointed, because she loves watching you on the weather. But
I threw her off with the politics night, though, right?
You did, yeah. Backstory to that: we were watching the local election coverage with you and Dave, and Ashley she just couldn't take Brett seriously. I mean, if you guys know the Brett that I know and my wife saw in college, you wouldn't be able to do it either.
WrestleMania, Royal Rumble,
we'll
down
be
in the
able
living
to be
room.
better friends now. We'll be able to do more. Like, for real, I told people that when I quit radio. It's just like, well, I'm
you
getting
get your life back.
Portion of my life back, right? I don't have to be watching games 24/7, and like it's. I'm happy for you. I think you'll be a happy guy, and we'll probably bother you from time to time to do some sports with us here on Iowa Everywhere if you're down.
Oh, definitely, love to do that.
All right, brother. Well, he's Brett. So final night on the air is Sunday, right?
Sunday night. Yep. Right before sound off.
All right, Brett will be signing off on the weather for the final time, and maybe Murph will let him wear a bag over his head on sound off.
That's how it should go out.
Thanks to our friends at Circa Sports Iowa, Circa Resort and Casino for bringing us today's program with Brett McIntyre. CW Pod here, signing off from the Channel Seed Studios with Brett McIntyre. I'm Chris Williams. We'll have two guys named Chris coming up on Thursday at 8:30. Jared and J-Bo coming up. The Hook. All your great shows here on Iowa Everywhere. Have a great rest of your week.